All right, Bible readers, it's time for another quick Bible study, and today it comes from our reading in Jonah 1 through Micah 5, and I'm going to focus mostly on Jonah, and I'm going to try and do something I've never done before, which is to try to summarize the entire book of Jonah with some detail to get it to go beyond, the typical Sunday school lesson of Jonah and the whale and all of that, which most people are aware of. But I want to explain why I'm calling this video, I Don't Like Jonah. It's simple. The reason I don't like Jonah is because I used to be like him. So what does that mean? Well, we're gonna have to kind of get some understanding of who Jonah was and how he responded to God. That's the critical thing. So let's jump into this man's life. I'm going to get a little bit more detail in the first few verses of Jonah, and then I'm going to really seriously condense the rest of the entire book and try to put it in a way that you can kind of understand in a very quick format who this man was. So I would encourage you, go read the entire book of Jonah. It's only 4 chapters. I don't ever want to it's not ever my goal to try to remove anything from context or whatever, but I think that you're going to get a good understanding of who Jonah is in a very short period of time. So hang with me. I'm glad you're here. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Tell a friend, tell a family member. I want to encourage people not only to read the Bible, but to get saved. If you're not saved, hey, none of this is going to make sense. Okay, so let's jump right in. Jonah 1:2 says, arise. So this is God telling Jonah, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me. All right. First of all, Jonah was going to somebody other than Israel to be a prophet to them. Sort of unusual. This happens a few times in the Bible, but it doesn't happen a lot. The vast majority of God's prophets in the Old Testament were only speaking to Israel. Okay, so this is what God is asking Jonah to do, to go to Nineveh and to cry against them. So I'm going to tell you this: God gives all of us direction. All we need to do is receive it from his words in the part of the Bible that's written to us. And that's why I always talk about dispensations. If you don't understand dispensations, connect with me. I'll send you a study that'll explain it. Dispensations is in the Bible 4 times. It's a Bible word. It has a Bible meaning. And if you don't understand it, you won't understand the Bible. Jonah 1:3. But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Okay, so God tells Jonah, hey, go do this. And Jonah's first response is to run away. This is why I don't like Jonah, because I did this in my youth. God, I got saved at a young age. I was leading people to the Lord, and then I rebelled. And literally for 8 years, I tried to run away from the Lord. I was this man, Jonah, for a long time. In fact, I should almost envy Jonah to some degree, because he got over it really quickly. It took me 8 years to get over it. So shame on me. So, like Jonah, a lot of people run away from God's directions. I mean, it's that simple. God is telling us all something very specific to do. A lot of people, they go, oh, God called me to do this, or God called me to do that. Well, be careful with that, because God called us all in the dispensation of the grace of God to do certain things. And it's primarily to speak the truth to all men and be all things to all men, so that they might get saved. Okay, if you're not doing that, you're effectively running away from God. You're being a Jonah. All right, Jonah 1:5. Then the mariners were afraid. Okay, so Jonah got on a boat to go to Joppa, and this is how he's in the sea, and eventually these men toss him out of the boat, but we'll get to that. So, but Jonah was gone out, was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. So the ship is in rough waters, and the men in the ship, who are not men of God, in fact, it says they're crying unto their God, little g. Okay, so these are not men of the God of the Bible, and Jonah is just down in the bottom of the boat sleeping. And so what I want to say here is that oftentimes as Christians, we end up fast asleep while the world is dying around us. When I think about those 8 years where I was trying to run away from the Lord, I had a terrible testimony. I wasn't telling anybody about the Lord. And I think about all the people that I could have been a witness to that are now dead, that I never spoke to. That hurts. I don't like it. And Jonah reminds me of this. And that's part of why I don't like him. Jonah.1:6. So the shipmaster came to him and said unto him, what meanest thou, O sleeper? Arise, call upon thy God. Hey, what a shame that sometimes the world has to say, wake up, Christian. What are you doing? The world looks at us. Oh man, we're coming into a time of a year where the world's going to look at you, Christian, and wonder. And sometimes they might wonder out loud, why is that Christian doing Halloween? Why is that Christian parent dressing up their kids in witch outfits and little outfits? And even if they're dressing them up as Bible characters and having trunk or treat at their church, the world is looking on at that Christian and wondering why you're engaging in Halloween. Better think about that. Christmas is a mess. Oh, you probably don't like me now. All right, back to Jonah. Jonah.1:7. And they said, everyone to his fellow, come and let us cast lots, that we may know for sure, or know for whose cause this evil is upon us. So this is often what the world does. They cast lots. It's like gambling or betting or, some kind of witchcraft thing, where, the world's trying to figure out what the truth is. And so they do these things. And so my point to you is maybe you're the cause of the problems that people are having because you won't open your mouth and speak the truth of God. Christian, if you don't have something that's so grand and impactful because of your relationship with the Lord, that your cup is overflowing and you have the ability to speak truth into people's life, if you don't have that, well, first of all, you need to make sure you're saved, and you need to make sure that you are actively trying to grow your relationship with the Lord. Because if it's not good enough inside of here to come out of your mouth, well, then I question what you have. Okay, your relationship between the Lord is between you and the Lord. I'm not judging you, but I'm saying if whatever you have inside is not good enough to come out of your mouth, you better think about that. All right, Jonah.1:8. Tell us, we pray thee, for whose cause this evil is upon us. So again, this is the lost men of the ship challenging Jonah, like, what is this about? Somehow they knew that this had something to do with Jonah. So Jonah.1:9, and he said unto them, I am an Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven. Verse 10, why hast thou done this? This is what the men are saying. For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord because he told them. Okay, Christian, the world knows when you're running away from the Lord. Again, if people know you're a Christian, but then they also know that you don't speak any truth, to them, you're running from the Lord. You're like a shell of a Christian, and to the world, it lacks integrity. I'm not judging you. I did this for years. Jonah.1:11. I'm going to start condensing. What shall we do unto thee, that the sea may be calm unto us? Hey, look, all these lost men cared about was that the sea would calm down so they wouldn't die, basically. And Jonah says, take me up and cast me forth into the sea. Jonah literally tells him, throw me into the sea. Jonah.1:13. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring it to the land, but they could not. So look, the men didn't want to immediately throw him into the sea. These men had some integrity. They didn't want this man to perish. Wherefore they cried unto the Lord. Okay, so all of a sudden now, because of all of these occurrences and Jonah's words, these lost men are crying unto God, and they're beseeching him, and they don't want to die for this man's life. That's what they say. Let us not perish for this man's life. They're literally, like asking God for mercy. So eventually, in verse 15, they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea. Can you imagine that moment? These men didn't want to do that, but they felt like they had no choice. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly and offered a sacrifice unto the Lord and made vows. Wow, all of a sudden these lost men are giving it up for the Lord. So you, Christian, don't ever minimize the impact that you can have on people by doing the right thing in front of the lost world. Jonah.1:17, now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. Look, science has argued forever and ever about, oh, a man couldn't survive in the belly of a whale for 3 days and blah, blah, blah. Hey, beware of science, falsely so-called. The Bible says that that God prepared a great fish. He prepared him. If your God isn't big enough to make anything necessary, then I'm not sure who your God is. Okay, so I know that my God can create a fish that's designed to contain a man for 3 days, if that's what God wants to do. Pretty easy. If you made the whole world and everything in it, what's a special fish? It's nothing. Jonah.2:1, then Jonah prayed. Hey, this is the first time it says that Jonah prayed. And isn't that just like the world? You ever seen that bumper sticker driving around that says, if all else fails, pray? Well, that's about the dumbest thing ever. The Apostle Paul says, pray without ceasing. Maybe if we prayed without ceasing, we wouldn't have to get to the point where all else failed. You see how you get these stupid philosophies around that spread around, and Christians stick a bumper sticker on their car, and they think they're doing the world a favor? They're not. You're never doing the world a favor by telling them lies. So when all else fails, pray is a lie. Pray without ceasing. Okay? It shouldn't have taken Jonah all the way until he lands in the belly of a fish to then pray. That's crazy. Again, this is why I don't like the guy. Because I used to do that. We oftentimes don't like when we see weaknesses and things in people that lack integrity. We don't like it because we recognize that in ourselves. Okay. Jonah.2:2, and he said, I cried by reason of mine affliction unto the Lord. Verse 7, when my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord. Well, hey, better late than never, right? Jonah.2:8, they that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. I'm going to say that again. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. Hey, religion is full of lying vanities. And that's why people lack mercy in their life. And then the next verse, Jonah almost has like a revelation. He says, salvation is of the Lord. Well, indeed it is. Jonah.3:1, and the word of the Lord came unto Jonah the second time. Okay, so Jonah's in the belly of the well, and now the Lord's talking to him again. And this time he says the same thing. Arise, go, and preach unto it the preaching that I bid thee, meaning the city of Nineveh. So guess what Jonah does? He jumps out of the belly of the whale and tries to swim off. No, by now, Jonah gets it. And so Jonah arose and went unto Nineveh. This was after the whale spit him up on the beach, basically. Jonah.3:4, and Jonah began to enter into the city, and he cried and said, yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Well, guess what happened? This is another reason I don't like Jonah. So the people of Nineveh believed God. What? Some crazy guy walks into the city and says, yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Imagine walking into any city in America today and having a big sign or having a, whatever, and saying, yet 40 days and this city will be overthrown. I think you would quickly get thrown under a bus and dragged off and never be heard from again. But in this time, the people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed a fast. So they stopped eating. They put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. And in my effort to condense, even the king of Nineveh did these things. For word came into the king of Nineveh, and God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God repented of the evil. Hey, I often talk about how God does evil, and Christians get all, what? You can't say that, blah, blah, blah. Well, you don't know the God of the Bible. I suspect there's probably 100 times or more where God proclaimed evil on people. The difference is the Bible never says that God did wickedness. So mankind can involve themselves in evil, and they can involve themselves in wickedness. The difference is God never did anything that was wicked. There's a difference between evil and wickedness. That's why the words are spelled different. Jonah 4:1. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was very angry. Think about this for a second. God tells Jonah to go to Nineveh and say these certain things, that 40 days and the city's going to be overthrown. And it was almost as though Jonah was hoping that the people would reject him and that the city would be overthrown. Because think about how he reacts. Jonah was very angry that the people believed and repented, and that God repented of the evil that he had planned to do. That's messed up. It's another reason I don't like Jonah. Because I've done the same thing more often than I'd like to admit, where maybe I told somebody the truth and then I sat back and hoped that they would be victim of their own ways or whatever, and then it didn't, but they received the truth, and there was almost a disappointment in me. It's madness. Jonah 4:2. I pray thee, O Lord, was not this my saying when I was yet in my country? Okay, I don't know exactly what this means, but it strikes me that Jonah had maybe had a discussion. It's not recorded in the book, so that's why I say I don't know exactly what it means, but it almost it strikes me as that Jonah had words with the Lord about something, about how the people of Nineveh were going to respond or whatever. So, but what really stands out to me here is that Jonah is just almost, well, you're going to see, he's going to argue with God about, why didn't you do what you said you were going to do against the city of Nineveh? And God's going to explain himself. Jonah 4:3. Therefore now, O Lord, take, I beseech thee, my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. So Jonah's so angry and disappointed in this whole thing. He's like suicidal. Then said the Lord, doest thou well to be angry? Hey, it's a rhetorical question. The Lord is telling him, it's not right that you're angry. So Jonah went out of the city till he might see what would become of the city. So, and then I condensed it, but he builds himself like a little hut, and he's gonna, I don't know if the weather was bad or whatever it was, but so he kind of camps out above the city in the hills, and he's almost like he's hoping that God's going to destroy the city. And this is what God says in Jonah 4:11. And I'm going to finish with Jonah. And should not I spare Nineveh? So this is the Lord speaking. And should not I spare Nineveh, that great city, wherein are more than 6,000,000. Okay, 6,000,000 is Old English for 120,000. So 120,000 persons that cannot discern between their right hand and their left hand. What does this indicate? This is children, really young children. Nineveh was a huge city because it had at least 120,000 children that were young enough they couldn't discern from their right and their left. So I don't know what the average age is of children, that can't discern right and left, but I suspect it's somewhere, 3, 4, 5 years old, whatever. It's different for every kid, but the bottom line is God knew. God said there's 120,000 very young children in that city. And so because of God's mercy and righteousness and his characters of justice, he didn't want to destroy the city. God doesn't want to destroy children. Okay, so that's why I don't like Jonah, because I recognize in him things that I have in me. All right, real quick, from the book of Micah, because we read, today's reading was the first 5 chapters of Micah, and I just want to point out one verse here and then I'm going to be done. Micah 4:9. Now, why dost thou cry out loud? Is there no king in thee? So think about this, Christian. If you find yourself crying out loud or crying unto others or the world in general, ask yourself, is there no king in thee? If you're a Christian, then the king, God, is in you. Cry unto him. All right. Hey, if you're watching until now, thank you for being here. Please subscribe to my channel and tell a friend. And wow, I hope you got some encouragement out of this. Have a great day. Have a good Bible read.